Coffee. Everyone's favorite beverage. Literally, besides water, coffee is the most consumed beverage in the world, which makes sense since we need it to survive. But that could also be true for a lot of coffee drinkers. In America alone, there are over 150 million coffee drinkers who consume about 400 million cups of coffee every single day and 146 billion cups of coffee every year. Some drink it in the morning, before work, and nowadays before school, or in the afternoon during a coffee break to avoid falling into a food coma or falling asleep when you should be focused, which in today's world is viewed as normal. However, before this became common practice, coffee was just consumed as a way to start your day off, just like you would with your breakfast orange juice or tea, not a way to stimulate more productivity during workdays or coffee breaks. That was until during World War II when a necktie manufacturer in Denver, Colorado called Wigman Weavers lost all their best loom operators to the war effort. Initially, they hired older men who couldn't get drafted to get the job done, but unfortunately they couldn't do it very well, so the company took a different route and began hiring women to do the job. Fortunately for the owners, the women excelled as loom operators. They were able to do so with even the most intricate and complicated patterns. But there was one problem. You see, the women were able to do the job really well, but only for about 4 or 5 hours. The owners decided to call a meeting with the workers to ask them what could they do to improve their efficiency and output, which the women replied with, "Give us some time at around 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, and give us some coffee and tea." So the owners gave it a try and instituted this break. To their surprise, as soon as they did that, overnight, the workers' productivity, efficiency, and quality control shot up. And just like that, the coffee break was born. After that, it became and remained standard practice amongst employers, though it's not referred to as a coffee break anymore. The next time you're at work, see if they provide free coffee for the employees to have. What might seem like a nice gesture from your boss is really just a way to extract more value from you. So it's really no surprise that now, according to the NCA, some 62% of American adults drink at least 1 cup of Joe every day, and many don't stop at 1 cup either. In fact, they found that the average American drinks more than 3 cups per day. Now that's exactly what it is, the average, which means that there are people, aka probably you, who consumes a lot more than just 3 cups of coffee a day.
But when I wake up, my drink is 8 shots of espresso.
According to the Perfect Brew, the average person will spend around $2,000 on Java per year. And if you're thinking to yourself, there's no fucking way I'm spending that much on coffee. If you factor in the average price for a cup of Joe in the US at $2.70, and you multiply that by the average consumption per day at 3, then multiply that by 5 work days, and then 52 weeks, you have a grand total of $2,106. And if you need more proof, here's a breakdown of the lowest prices for a cup of coffee from some of the most popular chains across the nation. Now, you could make the decision to buy an at-home coffee machine and start brewing your own coffee, bringing the cost down to around 16 to 25 cents per cup. But let's be honest, some of you could give 2 fucks about those stats or how much money you could be saving. I don't blame you. If that's what I'm spending in a year for something that makes me happy, feel better in the morning, and makes me more productive, why would I give it up? It'll make sense not to. But if coffee is so great for productivity, why has there been a rise in people trying to quit?
I'm gonna quit caffeine for 30 days. Yeah.
I really like coffee, but often I find that when I have coffee, it gives me really bad jitters. I end up not actually being able to do any work because I'm so hyper and I'm so excitable that I can't physically sit down. I have to go and do something physical, like unpack the dishwasher, which is also, great, that needs to be done, but not when you've got a deadline.
Here's why this happens. When you first start consuming coffee, its benefits are felt immediately. A jolt of energy is sent through your body, improving productivity and brain function, including memory, mood, reaction times, and general mental function. But to understand what's actually going on in your brain and how caffeine manipulates you into reaching for another cup of coffee, you first need to know the bodily chemicals that caffeine affects. That being adenosine, adrenaline, and dopamine. Starting off with adenosine, your neurons have something called an adenosine receptor, which accepts a molecule called adenosine that's responsible for making you tired. Throughout your day, your body produces more and more of it, so the longer that you're awake, the more adenosine binds with the receptors, and the sleepier you become. When you sleep at night, adenosine levels decrease. At least this is what's supposed to happen, because what caffeine in coffee does is bind to those receptors, blocking out adenosine, which is what makes you feel awake and alert temporarily. And in return for that fake energy boost now, you crash later, which is probably why after getting home and eating dinner, you're left with very little motivation to do anything but binge watch a show and knock out. The other thing that happens, when the brain doesn't regularly get enough adenosine, it creates more receptors. And when there are more receptors, more caffeine is needed to block them. This is why daily coffee drinkers build up a tolerance to caffeine and need more coffee for the same effect. So the uptick in consumption, combined with the fact that it may take up to 10 hours for caffeine to completely clear from your bloodstream, may be the cause for your poor sleep schedule. The next thing caffeine does is raise your blood pressure. This is done by triggering your adrenal glands to produce certain hormones that release more adrenaline, which is the hormone that controls your fight or flight response. This may be why avid coffee drinkers tend to have anxiety issues, and for some, full-blown anxiety attacks. The complete opposite of what you want to feel when you're trying to be as productive as possible. As for why, when you type in the word caffeine in Google, the first thing that comes out next to it is drug, it's because of dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that makes us feel good. An example of this will be when the body releases extra dopamine after exercising, which is why people tend to feel great about themselves afterwards. What caffeine does is it increases the amount of dopamine in our brain by blocking its reabsorption into our bodies. Now, it doesn't increase the amount of dopamine our bodies make, but it slows the rate at which dopamine leaves our brains and returns to our bodies, leading to elevated dopamine levels, which is why caffeine is addictive.
Coffee to me is it's a beautiful thing. There's nothing better than just waking up for a peaceful cup of joe, man. It's just my routine. I love it. It's simple. It's beautiful. I don't need it, but I really enjoy it.
Ooh, I love some coffee. Did you say decaf? No, I want the real thing. You might as well offer CBD to Snoop Dogg. Pour me the real stuff.
Now, whether you're in denial or not, if you're not able to go a day without coffee, even though you've tried before, it's not because you enjoy the morning ritual or the smell of coffee in the morning, because if that were the case, you would have switched to decaf by now. It's because you're an addict. If you still think that it's a stretch to call it a drug, consider the fact that a report conducted by the Huffington Post showed that 52% of coffee drinkers would give up on a shower rather than their morning cup of coffee. And 49% would rather not touch their phones for an entire month than go without drinking coffee. Ironically, giving up one addiction for another. Another thing to keep in mind is the fact that when Coca-Cola decided to no longer use cocaine in their product in 1903, their research and development team settled on caffeine to be the next best option.
And the way Coca-Cola brings you back so refreshed, so quickly. For Coke offers a bit of wholesome energy. Gives you a bright little lift just when you need it. In any season, enjoy bracing, ice-cold Coca-Cola.
While the consumption of caffeine does not compare to the havoc that comes with an illegal substance like cocaine, it can and does cause people to become extremely physically and mentally dependent on it, as where without it, no work will get done.
I struggled through my work for 3 hours. It was impossible to concentrate. My head was pulsing. I felt my veins in my head throbbing. I gave up on trying to work and went to bed at 5 p.m., hoping I'd feel better the next day.
This is also why companies like Starbucks and other major coffee chains are thriving. They are essentially selling you a legal addictive substance. Now, before you click off this video, ask yourself this question. Do you ever suddenly feel this drop in your productivity and figure you just need another cup of coffee? But all that does is make you feel like you've developed a strong case of ADHD. Now you can't focus, you're even less productive, and going to bed on time is a hopeless task? If so, I'm going to share with you a method of quitting coffee that will minimize any annoying withdrawal symptoms. Because let's face it, quitting cold turkey is not realistic, and quite frankly, a fucking stupid approach to giving up coffee, because you'll probably fail. Not because you suck or have no willpower, but because when all you need to get rid of the withdrawal symptoms is a cup of joe, you're gonna cave.
You drink your coffee. I tried, remember it was like a thing to like cut out caffeine, remember that whole spiel?
Yeah.
I lasted 6 hours, I was shaking with the cold sweats.
Yeah.
I almost died.
And before you start wondering if there's any scientific literature on this method, there isn't. This is just something that I decided to do because just like many others, I tried to quit cold turkey. And that lasted about 2 weeks before I realized I was a walking zombie. So here's a realistic and feasible way to do so. For starters, you have to make your own coffee at home. Despite whether you care about the money you'll save or not, this will give you control over how much caffeine you consume, which is a critical part of weaning off of it. Say you currently consume about 3 cups of coffee a day, or about 285 milligrams of caffeine on average. During the first week, you have 2 simple rules to follow. To start consuming only 2 servings and a half per day, and to consume all your caffeine for the day before 1 p.m. hits, and this rule applies to every step. This is great because you're weaning off a relatively small portion of your normal daily intake, which will help you avoid withdrawal symptoms and also allows your body to get accustomed to your new daily intake. And having all your caffeine before 1 p.m. gives the caffeine the 10 hours it usually takes to clear from your bloodstream, so you won't end up tossing and turning at 2 a.m. because you had an espresso shot at 3 p.m. The following week, you begin to consume only 2 servings, which is still 190 milligrams of caffeine. And after doing that, you go down to 1 serving and a half the following week, and then down to consuming 1 serving for another week. By this point, you have drastically dropped your overall intake of caffeine from 295 milligrams a day to 95 milligrams, which will greatly improve your anxiety affecting your productivity. The point of this method is that your body, just like it got accustomed to the 3 servings of coffee per day, slowly gets accustomed to every other serving without completely taking it away and ridding your brain of these immediate moments of dopamine and other chemical releases. And if you can't fathom the thought of getting more done without coffee, here's some examples of it.
In months 2 and 3, this is when the transformation really started to blossom. I was no longer dependent on caffeine. All of those nasty side effects went away, and I found that I had even more energy than when I used to consume caffeine. I also felt like I was consistently happier because I didn't have that mindset where before I have my coffee, I'm just angry and bitter and I need that coffee or else I'm gonna be this type of person.
Number 2 is I had more energy. When you drink a cup of coffee, you turn yourself on. But if you're going to turn yourself on and you're going to lift yourself up to here, you have to have balance and you have to come back down here. And this is another reason I should have known this. When I first went on pre-workout years ago, I would take it and I'd feel on top of the world, but then I'd get in after my workouts and I'd feel absolutely depressed because I'd crashed. And that is something that caffeine can do to some people. So once I got past all the side effects of coming off caffeine, I felt so much better, I felt so much happier, I had so much energy, my gym sessions were better.
Here's the thing, coffee and caffeine in general are everywhere now. It's possible to find coffee in almost every corner of the world. Furthermore, coffee is now more than a beverage. You see it in coffee vapes, bars, candies, ice cream, and even gum. In other words, caffeine is unavoidable, so it's completely up to you to control your consumption of modern society's #1 addiction.
COFFEE, I'm in denial that I'm a druggie.